Hi, so this one is going to be a little bit shorter, a little more light, especially after the last one. I'm going to talk about the ups and downs of transitioning. And to be clear, I don't think about this. Like, my daily life does not involve being trans in really any way at all. There is this weird perception that everything about us centers around being trans, and I'm doing a lot of videos specifically about this to start off with, but this does not enter into my daily life or routine in any way. So it's actually, I have to kind of think back to think about like what it was like to beginning, like in the early part of my transition. There's a phrase of euphoria versus euphoria. I've heard a few people use that term. It is a very weird, real thing that happens. There's all kinds of things that are firsts that you really like. It's exciting. There's also the euphoria part where you realize this isn't always gonna be good. Like, and sometimes it's stuff that you appreciate even though it's not good. And one of the examples is, I can remember at one point, I think I was HVAC certified because I worked on, in school, I did some stuff with refrigerated trucks and things. And I remember some guy came to where I work, and he was an HVAC tech, and he was talking about the blowers in the, this is a food, I worked in the food part of this store, and the blowers would shut off when the fire alarm was triggered. And that's because they want to control the airflow when fires happen. They don't want to feed a fire, and they want to push, like, for example, at elevators, there's usually fans that blow air down elevator shafts to keep fire away from the open doors in elevators. So if firefighters use the elevator, it opens up to a place that's at least clear. At least that's how I was explained to at one time. But this guy was explaining how HVAC stuff works to me, and having been certified, I knew exactly what he was talking about the whole time. And he was intentionally trying to talk down to me like I had no idea what he's talking about. And I just remember at the end of that, I was like, so the compressor failed? And he's just like, yeah. And I'm like, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, I'm not an idiot. And the look on his face was just like, just assumed. And, you know, most people don't have any reason to know about stuff like that. But there are so many times where you'll be talked down to. And that was one where our fans constantly were going down, and he was trying to explain how the system worked and why the specific fans were shutting off. And I'm like, it's really weird, because at the same time you're like, oh, this is must be how this guy talks to all women. I mean, so you're like, oh, cool, I'm included. Also, what the hell? That sucks. It happens a lot. Like, if I used to work on cars, but I don't want to work on my own car. You know, if I take my car somewhere for something, you know, you can spot a good shop because they'll explain things very clearly, and they'll ask you if you need to know further, or if you're, you know, just going to trust them. But a good place will offer to explain as deeply as you want to know. And if something's broken, they're going to explain to you typically what's wrong and why that happened sometimes, because one problem can cause another problem. Or you may come in for your car has an oxygen sensor code, and it's not your oxygen sensor, it's an injector failed or something. There's all kinds of things that can happen cars are very complicated. But man, I mean, if I were to take my car in before transitioning, it was always, it's a very different experience. And not always, to people's credit, a lot of times people are, still good at their jobs. But every now and then you get somebody who just assumes that you know absolutely nothing. And it's hard for me not to be to smile when somebody talks down to me in that way. It's gross, but it's also kind of gender affirming. That's one way that I've noticed, and people brushing your opinions aside. I can think of multiple times at work where I would be I can think we had these little electric carts, and somebody was saying one of them was broken and I think somebody stole a battery and they were messing with the harness. And I'm like, all you have to do is connect that and this and do this and get a new battery. And then you're just like, how would you know? I'm like, I know it's hard to believe, but I know. That's one of the downsides. And again, sometimes it feels gross and good at the same time. Some of the upsides is, I can think of multiple times where I was included in a group and I realized, oh, it's a group that I want to be included in. We were just having a talk with a bunch of people at work, and I looked around and it was all women. And we were all having kind of similar complaints about similar people. And I just think it's a way that it isn't you, it's more, positive. But every now and then you'll have that kind of experience. Even now, 20 years later, every now and then I'm just like, oh, that's nice. But transitioning, it shouldn't be something that it shouldn't all be uphill. There are a lot of good things that you're going to get to, the first time you dress in a way and you present yourself and you catch yourself in the mirror. And sometimes when you're not expecting it, you just happen to be walking by a mirror or something, and you just see a different person, and that person is more what's in your head. That's priceless. I mean, the first time that happens, I can remember the first time that happened, and it's been oh my God, more like 30 years. It was when I was 19, so that was a long time ago. Still took me a while to figure out everything and actually do something about it, but I remember the first time I came up to Seattle and presenting as another gender and going out dancing, and still to this day, that's one of the few pictures of me having a genuine full smile, just ear to ear. I still have some of those pictures. It's one of my first positive memories with all this, because it sometimes is hell, and sometimes it is, especially early on, it's a lot, and you have to just suck it up and deal with it. Every now and then it's good, and you should take those opportunities to appreciate it. I can't even think of the last time I really sat down and thought about being trans, but I can there's moments that I remember from transitioning, and one of them is that time, first time when I came up and we went to a bunch of clubs up here. Another is deciding to go into an interview, and that's when I started socially transitioning, and I said, screw it, I'm just going to go presenting as myself. And it went surprisingly well. I happened to get an interviewer that was full of questions. Again, uncomfortable for me, but it went so well that it just makes you wonder why you hadn't done it sooner sometimes. Some of this stuff really is a lot less difficult than you think it is. But the talking down to is, I think, eye-opening if you've never had that experience. Like, especially if you're not trans, any guy that's ever, rolled your eyes when your girlfriend said somebody was talking down to them or treating them in a certain way. I am here to say that it is night and day different how people talk to people based on their gender and assumptions that they're making based therein. Sometimes it's hard to deal with. Sometimes you can just kind of see it for what it is. It's a failing in other people. But all of this stuff, like I said, some of it is good and some of it you should appreciate. And whether it is, you voice trained for a long time and you finally got it, or you answered the phone and somebody correctly identified your gender. Like, these are all things, like little stuff like changing your driver's license was one of those ones for me. I did that way before I was completely socially transitioned, which led to some very fun situations when I had to show ID. But it's different now. It's a lot easier in some ways. And in some ways I feel like people don't get some of those experiences, because in some ways it is much more known, especially if you live in a place where, people are fairly accepting. Those were some of the best memories I had when I was like going to Seattle, changing clothes somewhere along the way, and then going out and being treated like in a way that I appreciated. And then having the experience of having to go through the opposite, change and go back home, and people didn't know. And, it sucked, but I put off telling people for a long time, again, because I think people make it more difficult sometimes than it actually is. There's a lot of little stuff that you notice, but one of the things for me, is the phone. Like I don't get misgendered very often, depending on what I'm doing with my voice, but on the phone I get it a lot, and it is frustrating. That's one of those things. It's not like euphoria, it's just straight up irritating. But it's my own fault because I haven't put in the work. And, I put in the work and then decided I didn't care, which, sometimes I regret. But it does give you a unique sort of perspective into people. And that is one thing that I do appreciate about this whole process. I have seen two ways that people can treat you, and whether it's, at work, or I used to wait for the bus like 3:00 in the morning at 3rd and Pike. And if anybody knows Seattle, they know how much fun that intersection is. I used to have to wait at that intersection for the bus really late at night. And it is a different experience when you are potentially a target. I never had to do anything, but I did have to run a couple people off. Like, it got sketchy a few times. But it is a very different experience, and I do appreciate the ability to have those two different interactions with people and appreciate it more, because women obviously have to deal with being talked down to, and going to get your car fixed, and maybe you don't know anything about cars and getting treated a certain way. Men probably will never appreciate that unless they've been in a situation that's similar and they can really appreciate what it's like. Having seen both sides of it, man, do I go out of my way. Like, if somebody's picking on somebody else, I am the first to be a problem. I can think of multiple times at work when I've had a manager was dealing with somebody, and it starts to get to where they start to threaten. I am the first one there, especially if it's a female manager. Like, you'll have people that are like, oh yeah, I should just slap you around. And I'm like, okay, let's go. Like, I have a hard time with that, because if at any point in the past I ever treated anybody like that, which I don't think I did, obviously I want to make up for that, but it's jarring once you see it, and it's hard to unsee it once you do. It has been fun though, when that happens, being able to make people as uncomfortable as they try to make other people. That is something that I do enjoy. When those uncomfortable situations pop up, God, I make it so much worse for everybody, and it's a lot of fun for me. I don't recommend it. Not everybody's gonna enjoy that. I like the tense, like somebody eating their words, going, oh, I'm the jerk here. Cool. So that's all for this. This one's really simple, more of a fun one. So, I'll see you in the next one. Hopefully you can find somebody, you take care of yourself and find somebody else to take care of. This is going to be a rough year, and I can't wait till I start talking about politics, because, man, there's a lot to talk about.